Hey everyone, welcome back to Chat Like a Native.
Glad to be back.
I'm so excited for this deep dive. We're going to be talking all about how to sound more like a native speaker.
It's going to be good.
So many of you out there, you've been working so hard.
Yeah.
You've got the grammar down, you've got a decent vocabulary, but you're ready to, take it up a notch.
Right.
You want to sound more natural, more fluent, and just blend in with those native speakers.
Exactly.
So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today.
Love it.
We're going to look at three main areas: building a really flexible vocabulary, mastering everyday expressions, and using synonyms like a pro.
Those are the key ingredients.
They really are.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, sometimes English can feel a bit, textbooky,
A little stiff, yeah.
Yeah, and we want to break free from that. We want you to sound more like you're just chatting with friends effortlessly.
Right.
So are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, first up, vocabulary. Now, before you groan and think, oh no, not another vocabulary lesson, hear me out.
I think a lot of people get a little scared when they hear vocabulary.
They do. But we're not talking about cramming your head with a million obscure words.
No.
It's really about building a core set of words, like a toolbox, that you can use to express yourself clearly, understand others, and navigate everyday situations.
That's a great analogy, a toolbox.
It is, right. It's like having the right tool for the right job.
Exactly, yeah. You don't need every tool under the sun, just the essential ones.
Right, the ones you'll use most often.
And
And the more words you have in your toolbox, the more easily you can grasp subtle meanings, express your own thoughts precisely, and just feel more confident overall.
I've always found that the more vocabulary I have at my disposal, the more I can appreciate the beauty of the language, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you start to see the nuances, the shades of meaning, the way words connect with each other.
It's almost like you're unlocking a secret code.
Yeah, and you get to play with the language more, Be creative, express yourself in different ways.
Totally. And it's not just about communication either.
Yeah.
A wider vocabulary can give you a deeper understanding of the culture behind a language.
That's so true.
The words people use often reflect their values, their history, their worldview.
For example, think about how many different words there are for love in English.
Right.
Each one has slightly different connotations and tells you something about how we, as English speakers, view this complex emotion.
It's fascinating, isn't it? So for our listeners who are eager to expand their vocabulary and really integrate it into their lives, what are some practical things they can start doing today?
Well, first I would say don't make it a chore, make it fun.
Right.
Think about the things you already enjoy doing in English, like reading books, watching movies, listening to podcasts, even scrolling through social media.
Right.
Those are all fantastic opportunities to encounter new words. And the key is to be curious. When you come across a word you don't know, don't just skip over it. Look it up.
And I would add, don't just look it up in isolation. Try to see how it's used in a sentence, in context.
Yeah, context is everything. It gives you a much richer understanding of the word's meaning and how it's actually used.
Exactly. And then, once you've looked it up, don't just forget about it. Try to use it yourself.
Yeah, put it into practice. That's how it really sticks. You could try writing it down in a sentence, maybe even use it in a conversation.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the learning process.
Oh, absolutely. Mistakes are inevitable, and they're actually a great way to learn.
They really are. So we've covered vocabulary. Now let's move on to something that can instantly make you sound more like a native speaker. Everyday expressions.
These are the little gems that spice up the language.
They really are. And they're everywhere. Think about it. You hear them in movies, in songs, in casual conversations.
Yeah, they're like the secret handshake of native speakers.
Right. And they often have meanings that you wouldn't necessarily guess just by looking at the individual words.
That's what makes them so tricky.
It can be really confusing if you're not familiar with them.
Absolutely. You could understand every single word in an expression, but the overall meaning just flies over your head.
Exactly. So can you give us some examples of these everyday expressions that our listeners might have encountered?
Sure. One that comes to mind is piece of cake. It doesn't actually have anything to do with cake.
No cake involved.
It just means that something is very easy. Like if someone says, oh, that test was a piece of cake, they're saying it was super easy for them.
Right. Another one I hear all the time is under the weather.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
It's a polite way of saying you're not feeling well.
Right. And it's much more common than saying, I'm sick.
That's much more natural.
Yeah, exactly. And it's more interesting, too.
It is. And one of my favorites is break a leg.
Yes, that one's always fun to explain to non-native speakers.
It is, because literally you don't want someone to break their leg.
Definitely not.
It's actually a way of wishing someone good luck, especially in the theater world.
Yeah, it's like saying, go out there and do your best.
So how can our listeners start to pick up on and use these everyday expressions more effectively?
Immersion, immersion, immersion. Surround yourself with authentic English content. Watch movies, listen to music, follow English-speaking social media accounts.
And don't just passively consume it.
No, be active. Pay attention to how native speakers use these expressions. Notice the context, the tone of voice, the body language.
And don't be afraid to repeat them out loud.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. The more you say them, the more natural they'll become.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to our final area for today. Synonyms.
The power of variety.
Exactly. Synonyms are words that have similar meanings, but with subtle differences.
And they're like the secret weapon for sounding more sophisticated and avoiding repetition.
Right, because let's be honest, using the same word over and over again can get a bit boring.
Definitely. And it can make your English sound a bit basic.
So could you give us an example of how using synonyms can really enhance your English?
Sure. Let's take the word happy. It's a perfectly good word, but there are so many other ways to express happiness. You could say joyful, which suggests a more exuberant, outward happiness, or content, which describes a more peaceful, satisfied feeling, or elated, which implies a sense of exhilaration and delight.
It's like you're painting with a wider palette of colors.
Exactly. And by choosing the right synonym for the right situation, you can express yourself more precisely and make your English more vivid and engaging.
And how can our listeners learn and start using synonyms effectively?
Again, context is key. Pay attention to how native speakers use different synonyms in different situations. A good dictionary or thesaurus can also be really helpful.
And there's so many online resources now, too.
Oh, tons. There are websites and apps dedicated to synonyms and antonyms.
And quizzes and games that make learning fun.
Yeah, you can even challenge yourself to use a new synonym every day.
That's a great idea. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the importance of building a flexible vocabulary, mastering everyday expressions, and using synonyms like a pro.
And hopefully given our listeners some practical tips to take their English to the next level.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up, I want to emphasize one more thing.
Yeah.
Be patient with yourself.
Yes, learning a language takes time and effort.
It's a journey, not a destination. So don't get discouraged if you don't see results overnight. Just keep practicing and enjoying the process.
And remember, every new word, every new expression you learn brings you one step closer to your goal of speaking English confidently and naturally.
So true. And on that note, here's a challenge for you to think about this week. Choose one everyday English expression that you always found a bit confusing. Maybe you've heard it in a movie or a song, but you're not quite sure how to use it yourself. Now, make it your mission to really understand that expression. Listen for it in conversations, look it up in different contexts, even try using it yourself, and see if, by the end of the week, you've cracked the code.
I love that. It's a great way to turn everyday life into a language learning opportunity.
Exactly. So that's it for this week's Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.
And keep chatting.
Until next time.
See ya. Bye.